They weren't playing pickleball 40 years ago, probably. Horseshoes, maybe. A lot of things change, but some things stay the same. And Monday night at Boys State is sports night. And I'd like to welcome your host of Sports Night. He's an MBS Hall of Famer due to his commitment to the program, and he's a Rittner High School Hall of Famer because of his exploits on the baseball diamond. Please welcome Marshall Iron Mike Stewart. Yeah. And Iron Mike has got a great guest for you tonight. He's a Division I All-American, first-round NFL draft pick, and CIA agent. Let's learn a little bit more about tonight's guest, Howard Richards.
Howard Richards began his football career at Southwest High School in St. Louis. He excelled as one of the best high school linemen in the state of Missouri. He earned City All-District honors in 1976. He was highly recruited and caught the attention of several big-time college football schools. Eventually, he chose Mizzou. Starting 4 games in his freshman season, he went on to play 40 consecutive games for the Tigers. He was an All-Big 8 lineman, an offensive co-captain, and earned All-American honors his senior year. In 1981, he was the Dallas Cowboys' #1 pick in the NFL draft.
Cowboys first-round selection, Howard Richards, tackle, Missouri.
Howard Richards, the tackle from Missouri, selected by Dallas on the 26th pick. He was a freshman starter, showed a great deal of improvement, second-team All-American from UPI, third team from the Football News. He wears number 72 in this footage.
He played 6 seasons on the offensive line for Dallas, blocking for Cowboy greats Danny White, Ron Springs, and Hall of Famer Tony Dorsett. He was traded to the Seattle Seahawks in 1987, but several injuries he endured throughout his career finally took their toll, and he retired from the NFL that same year. Not one to rest on a successful football career, he found a new challenge and joined the CIA.
I make this look good.
You really are CIA.
He served as a Central Intelligence agent for 13 years. His duty included assignments in the protection detail for several top CIA officials. Now, he works in broadcasting and is heading into his 11th season as the radio color analyst for Mizzou football.
Pitch it out left side, batted down by Nick Bolton. He wanted to get Marshall on the wing, on the flat. It brings up 4th and goal.
My goodness. I mean, Nick Bolton, so alert, so aware.
Howard Richards is our guest on Sports Night at Missouri Boys State.
I think you have some business you'd like to take care of.
So, is Evan Atchison here? There he, hey, come up here for a second. What's up, Evan? So, your dad's a good friend of mine. You know that? I did know that. So he wanted to make sure that you were here and not playing hooky. So just to keep you
lucky. Hey, you got to turn your microphone on. Just slip that button in there.
I guess it's the one that says on, huh? How about that?
There you go.
All right, beautiful.
All right.
See, there's people backstage that are supposed to do that, but anyway.
We let you down this time. Please have a seat. Let's
Thank you.
talk a little bit.
So wait a minute, before we, Marshall?
Yes.
Commercial?
Yes. Nobody knows that's my true identity. You're in the CIA. You figured that out.
Now we
I
know.
can't hide. My true name is Marshall Stewart, not Mike, but people call me Mike. And those of you in the journalism school, my son is in the journalism school. I gave him that name too, so there's a little information for you when you go to the
Very
journalism
good.
school. So,
I'll have to
yeah.
meet him and go,
I can't believe you outed me right here with my name. Okay.
this is not a prop.
It is not a problem. It is not a problem. All right, so let's talk a little bit. I thought it'd be good to kind of do a little recap on your career, talk a little bit about what you've done. We saw the video, and some of the things in the video are certainly exciting and we're topics to talk about. So let's talk a little bit about your high school time, what you did at Southwest, how you got into football. You had a very interesting journey educationally.
So I started, the reason I even got to Southwest High School, how many from St. Louis here? So as you know, well, Southwest, you guys may not know this, but it's now known as Central Visual Performing Arts. It's the corner of Kings Highway and Arsenal. Well, it's now known as Central Visual Performing Arts. It's like a magnet school and an ROTC school. And so that was the building where I attended high school. It was one of the 10 public high schools in St. Louis, which closed some time ago. But how I got there, because I grew up in North St. Louis, and obviously Southwest is in South St. Louis. I went through the desegregation program in I think it was 69. Started at a school called Walnut Park, and I was in the gifted program. And then probably 2 months into that, deseg started, and we were bused from the north, from Walnut Park, over to a school called Wade on South Vanderbilt. And by the time I got through, got to 8th grade, there was a teacher strike. And as I understood it, because of budget cuts, Southwest was going to be the only high school to keep the gifted program. Now, if anyone has any other information about that, let me know, because that's the story they told me. So that's how I ended up going to Southwest. So it took me about an hour to get there every day, but I think it was the best place for me. It was during deseg. There are a lot of issues between obviously blacks, whites, and other ethnicities, but that time, sort of being, I guess you might say, forced into going to school with kids that don't look like you, I think it was great for not just me, but for all of us. We had no issues from the standpoint of race relations, and I am still really good friends with many of my high school classmates. So that's how I got there. Played football, had one of the greatest high school football coaches St. Louis has ever seen, Leon Antone. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he was very instrumental in guiding me and telling me what I needed to do to prepare for being a college football player. He told me, he said, Flad, you've got a chance to play at the D1 level. I was playing basketball at the time, and I also played baseball for a year, which was my first love, by the way, baseball. But I grew into my body, and I've been this height since I was 15, believe it or not. I stopped growing at 15, so I was always one of the tallest guys in school. But he said, hey, here's what you got to do. You got to work on your body. I'd advise you to give up basketball. I know you love it, but you don't want anything to sort of impede your progress, get hurt or anything before you make it up at Mizzou. And by this time, I had already signed my letter of intent to attend Mizzou. And, that advice that he gave me, and high school football coaches are they kind of replace or sort of substitute for father figures. Even though I had a father and a stepdad, he was that presence for me. You know, you respected the guy. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the show Kojak. Parents probably have. But if you ever see Telly Savalas, and both Savalas and my coach Anton were both Greek, but Savalas, tall, you know, svelte, bald, of course, and always had like a Tootsie Roll pop in his mouth. Well, my coach was like, if you squashed him, he looked like a round, rotund Telly Savalas, minus the lollipop.
So you're recruited by a number of teams, by a number of schools. How did you get to Mizzou? How is it that Mizzou was your pick?
Ultimately, two things. And after visiting all the other schools, of course, we all sort of think we want to play in the National Football League. And as an offensive lineman and learning how to both run block and pass block, how many football players we have? All right. All right. So you've got to be able to do both very well. Mizzou at the time had one of those programs where they had a more balanced attack. They didn't run the ball exclusively like, you know, Oklahoma did in their wishbone. So that really wasn't an option for me. I wanted to go to a team that did utilize a balanced attack. Mizzou was it for me. I didn't really ever think that Mizzou would be the spot for me. I grew up watching Notre Dame highlights on Sunday morning. You remember these, right?
Oh, yes.
And I always wanted to go to Notre Dame. I mean, we wore the same colors as Notre Dame did, you know, green and gold, sometimes blue. We ran the same defense that they did. So it was easy for me. You know, we play games on Saturday. I'd watch them on Sunday, and stuff I picked up from Sunday I'd try to use, you know, the next week. So it was easy for me. Unfortunately, for me, Notre Dame never offered me a scholarship. So when Mizzou came calling, it was an easy decision for me. We played Notre Dame the first game of the season, my sophomore year. Warren Powers was the head coach, his very first game. Coaching against a former Missouri coach, Dan Devine, and we beat them. We beat them 3-0. It was about 95 degrees and 90% humidity. Joe Montana was the quarterback for the Fighting Irish at the time, and we beat him 3-0. It was a tremendous victory for us. It was the start of, you know, just a great college experience for me, and I never looked back. But I think also my head coach, Coach Anton, had a sister who just so happened to be married to one of the best sports columnists probably the country's ever known, Bob Brake. So I think I later found out they were working the scenes along with Coach John Cadillac, who was also the big recruiter for Mizzou at the time, and who was also known as Mr. Mizzou. I think they were in cahoots, and unbeknownst to me, they made it easy for me to make my decision to get there. And I never looked back. It was the best decision. It all worked out for me in college. You know, I was a first-round pick. It was everything that I could have ever wanted. I had great education there, and a number of instrumental and influential college professors that I'm still friends with today that, you know, helped shape and guide me. So one of the lessons, and I'll tell you guys now, you know, start building those relationships right now. You don't even look at them as relationships, but if you latch on to someone that can help guide you, or someone in a field of study that you want to, you know, follow in a career path, just go to them. You know, they will be honored and flattered that you come to them asking them for advice.
So you're at Mizzou. You're playing with an amazing group of athletes. James Wilder, Phil Bradley, Kellen Winslow, some terrific athletes. You get to an All-American status. You're all Big Eight. You're having a terrific time, and then you're the number one pick in one of the best draft classes Mizzou's ever had. Talk about your teammates and some of the people you played with.
Wow. And so you named a bunch of guys that were tremendous names, household names, and taking nothing away from them. I played with a bunch of other guys whose names you never hear about. Sure. but still wonderful teammates, guys that I still connect with today. You know, the likes of, you know, Pete Woods, of course, whose mother was the first lieutenant governor in the state of Missouri as a female. Ron Varelli, who was an outstanding kicker. You know, Mike Hyde, who was a quarterback. Andy Limbaugh, who was cousin to Rush Limbaugh, who recently passed away, but his father and brother or federal judges. Dad's retired, but his brother's still on the federal bench from Cape Girardeau. But a number of guys like that who, you know, I still keep in touch with. And you know, it's almost as though we're still in college. We still get together, we laugh and joke, but again, it's those relationships. But the likes of Kellen Winslow, Phil Bradley, Eric Wright, one of my closest friends. You know, I was in his wedding, he was in mine. He got married again, I was in that one too. just had a baby at the age of 60. Oh, I said, you're going to be working till you're 90.
Good for him.
But again, just a great group of guys. In fact, as you mentioned, we had 7 guys drafted in that season alone, which is tied with only the 1943 class. So, you know, Gary Pinkel had a lot of outstanding players, but he never has had a draft class with 7 or more. So we're proud of that. It's almost like the Miami Dolphins as some team approaches going undefeated. We always look to see, we want them to do well, but we don't want them to outdraft our class. So I think the record's safe for one more year.
So your number 1 pick of the Dallas Cowboys. I saw an article that Gil Brandt said, the GM at the time said, this man is a perfect fit for the Dallas Cowboys.
It was one of the best experiences I had in my life. Growing up as a big Red fan, St. Louis Football Cardinals, and of course I had an uncle who played for the team, Ernie McMillan, who was a perennial All-Pro, and whose son Eric, my first cousin, was also a Mizzou standout at Mizzou and was the AFC Defensive Rookie of the Year in '88 with the Jets. To grow up a Cardinals fan and then all of a sudden get selected by the Cowboys, needless to say, I changed my allegiances right away. But it was a tremendous time. You know, Tom Landry, one of the most revered and winningest coaches of all of football, a guy that everyone, he's like a god, and still to this day. You know, 21 years after his death. And, you know, people compare organizations, you know, when Landry and Brandt and Tex Schramm were running the Cowboys. And now, of course, it's Jerry Jones and the Jones family. And it all really stemmed from the way that Landry was treated as he exited as the head coach and when Jerry Jones hired Jimmy Johnson. Didn't sit well with a lot of people. Wasn't really their fault. Some reporter broke the story before they had a chance to approach Tom Landry about the decision that they were going to make. So it was awkward, and I think the Jones family has paid a deep price for it up until the time they won their first Super Bowl in, I think, '92. So it's worked out. You know, people still love Landry. I mean, there's a statue outside of AT&T Stadium, and you know, he did a tremendous amount for that city. If anyone could ever still be talked about as much as he is today and to be compared as one of the best to ever do it, you know, I think he did some things the right way.
How about some questions from the audience on football? Do you guys want to ask Howard about some of his career in football? Anyone have something in the audience? We have... The lights are tough. Let's go over to this side right here. You have a question?
Thank you for taking your time to speak with us tonight.
Thank you.
My name is Nicholas Whittington, and I'm representing Clark City. While playing football at the University of Missouri, you had an extremely successful career in the program. However, after just a few years in the NFL, you were plagued with multiple injuries throughout the rest of the time in the league. How did these injuries affect you after leaving the NFL, and do they affect decisions you make in your life today? Thank you.
Good question. So the injuries that I had were I had Well, 84 was the very first knee injury ever. Hadn't missed a game in college, rarely got hurt. In my fourth year, in fact, playing in front of the home crowd at Busch Stadium against the Cardinals, I tore my quad tendon in my right knee. And I had our team doctors, after I had time to sort of have the surgery and wait a few months and actually talk to them when I started my rehab, the team doctor mentioned to me that, this is a very serious injury. And he goes, I'm not sure how the rehab will go, but if it doesn't go the way you hope and the way we hope, you should probably consider retirement. He goes, because we haven't seen one that bad, and it's not going to be easy to come back from this. And to hear that news is somewhat, of course, depressing. At the same time, it motivated me because I felt that I hadn't done all the things, even in my fourth year, that I wanted to do as a professional football player. So it motivated me to come back. And every time I'd go to that training room and get treatment, and, when they're forcibly bending my knee to get the flexibility back, and I'm screaming and near tears, I just thought about that statement. And lo and behold, it took 11 months, but I made it back to the roster. And then the following year in '86, ended up as a starter again until I got hurt with another injury. But it was a milestone for me to be able to, when doctors are telling you you probably shouldn't play again, to be able to, rehab and make it back to an active roster and then become a starter again. So I put it all in perspective, and I made a promise to myself because I knew how difficult it was to go through that. And the promise was, if I ever have another major serious injury, I'll probably hang it up after that, because I knew what it would take. And sure enough, in '87, I had that injury as a member of the Seattle Seahawks, and I knew at that time that was going to be the last time I'd ever put on a helmet and shoulder pads and play in a game, because not that I didn't feel that I was up to that challenge of doing it again, because I could have. But at the time, 28 years old, it's kind of an old man as an offensive lineman. 2 major knee injuries. I knew it would be tough for any team to want to invest a lot in me as an aging veteran with 2 major knees. Although rehab today is much, much better. It was just a different time then. So I made the decision after that second injury that I'd end my career and move forward. And I had been preparing for that day. So I knew that my career was over, and I was immediately going to. So I went back to school right away, because I didn't finish my degree in 4 years. Not because I didn't study or anything like that, but I started at Mizzou as an engineering student for the first year. And all those classes didn't really count towards my broadcast communications career. So I had to spend extra time, which is why I needed to go back and finish that next year. So I enrolled at the University of North Texas, and halfway through the semester they told me, these hours you took here will not transfer. So I was married at the time. I called Michael Porter, who was my advisor going back to 1979. I told him the story. I said, what do I need to graduate? He goes, give me a day or two and I'll get back to you. And sure enough, he called me the next day and said, here's what you need. You need 20 hours. 6 of those need to be an internship, and you can graduate in December. I said, I will see you in June. Packed up, went back to Columbia, took that internship in the summer, and well, actually, I took 6 hours in the summer, and then did the internship in the fall. Worked at Channel 13 in Jefferson City, KRCG. Any Jefferson City folks here? All right, KRCG with Jim Reek and what's Rod's last name? Rod Smith, who used to be really skinny. He's put on a little weight now, but my man Rod, great guy. They let me intern there. I did what I wanted to do. I was on air, which was unprecedented for a student, that wasn't doing it at KOMU, the university-owned station. But it worked out for me and helped me tremendously in my preparation for what I do today in the broadcast industry.
So in 1985, the Cowboys rewarded you with the Ed Block Courage Award for your comeback.
Indeed.
And that obviously had some impact on you as well, to be able to overcome that injury and get back to playing in the NFL.
Yeah, to be honored by, selected by your teammates and coaches for that award, because they realized what it took to come back from that injury, and to know that your teammates knew what you went through and how they supported me and knew how difficult it was a tremendous honor also.
Another football question back here, right here.
Thank you for speaking tonight. My name is Matt Marlowe. I'm representing Pershing City. I'm also going to be at Mizzou Engineering as well, so kudos for that. Many NFL players, current and former, have suffered brain injuries such as CTE as a result of their career. As a former NFL player and as someone who's worked in public service, I was wondering what we could do as citizens today to advocate for player safety in the NFL.
Excellent question. Thank you for that, Matt. I think the biggest thing is educate yourself. Learn as much about it as you possibly can. We knew none of it up until the landmark settlement of the lawsuit in 2013. As players, you knew that you had a concussion. You knew that some doctor would come up to you and pop ammonia cap, or otherwise known as smelling salts, and put it under your nose and put a few fingers up, and that was the concussion protocol. I mean, if you could count and recite your name, you're going back in. Well, we now know that these types of head injuries are more damaging than what we knew when I was a player. Okay, so the NFL, of course, has now developed this, well, not just the NFL, but in the collegiate level in high school, these concussion protocols, and there's physicians that are there. They look for a number of signs from a player, that shows whether or not this guy's able to go back into a game. And, those are great precautions and all that. And people ask, if you had a son, would you allow your son to play? And, that's a difficult decision. I think I would. And even as a youngster, I don't think I'd allow him to play or try to persuade him not to play before the age of 14, when your body has a chance to sort of mature. Those types of injuries that when you're banging heads at the age of, 7, 8, 9 years old, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. But, awareness, because there's all kinds of information that's out there now, for people to, absorb and really learn about whether or not this is something you want your child or your friend's child to go through. So it becomes an individual decision as to whether or not you want to do it. I'll ask the question that someone else may ask, would I have done it again? Would I choose to do it again? And I probably would, even knowing what I know now. And I would certainly look for a lot of the signs and pull myself out, when you got massive headaches and, you start seeing spots all the time. I would have, probably taken a break at that point, because this happens on a repetitive basis. It's not just on games when you see a guy get, hit and splayed out on the field. In practice, and back in the days when I played, with 2-a-day practices and full padded practices, you're hitting on practically every play. So I went to a study in Boston, sort of a joint study with Harvard and Boston University, and also the Veterans Administration is now involved. They concluded that in all the years that I played the sport, that I probably suffered at minimum, 550 concussive episodes. Now, anytime your head collides with another helmet, guess what happens? That brain inside of your skull rattles inside of that skull, and it makes contact with that brain. That's a concussive episode. And anytime that happens, it can cause damage, to different parts of the brain. So those are things to consider. Now, not everyone's going to be affected by it, even though they've had multiple injuries. But we've seen now high school kids that have played the sport for 1 year, soccer players, female soccer players, they're heading the ball. Those lead to concussions and concussive episodes. So it's a very serious thing to pay attention to. But I think with research and all the information that's coming out, people have the ability to make much more informed decisions about whether or not they want to allow, their relative to continue to play the game. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So for those of you who don't know, Howard is the president of the St. Louis chapter of the NFLPA, NFL Players Association. Have you been involved at all in discussions with the NFL about the protocols for head injuries? And you've made some, I think you've made some inroads, but it's been difficult, hasn't it?
It has. Now, my discussions don't go necessarily directly to the NFL. They're through the Players Union, the NFLPA, the National Football League Players Association, specifically for me, the retired players. But the parallel organization is with current players also, and we have a staff that represents both. And we have, a number of programs that spawned out of this settlement. The concussion settlement from 2013, the NFL funded the Players Trust, known now as the Trust. And one of the benefits of the Trust is that there's a program called Brain and Body. And for retired players, you have the ability every 5 years to go to a facility like the Cleveland Clinic, which is world-renowned. They do comprehensive testing, not just for head injuries, but, heart, other cardiovascular-related things. Everything, prostate cancer screening, colon cancer screening. It is about as comprehensive as you can imagine. The test is like $15,000 to $20,000. I mean, I don't think anyone has the, just to pay it out of pocket, it'd be crazy. But, it's one of the benefits of being a former player. They realize the need, because let's face it, a lot of guys, especially former players, are a little macho and don't think that they should go and visit doctors. Well, we all should, whether you play the game or not. As young men, pay attention to your bodies and don't be afraid to go to see a doctor. I mean, if something is wrong with you, if you don't feel right, get in there, talk to your folks, go to your teacher, go to your instructor, get in to see the doctor, because preventative health is what can extend your life. If you catch something early enough, there's a good chance, you can live a normal life, as opposed to not paying attention to those signs and ultimately ending up with some sort of terminal illness or debilitating illness.
That is amazing advice, absolutely amazing advice. Now I want to get to the, yes. I want to get to the CIA. I want to talk about the amazing leap you made to the CIA career you had. Another football question, though, before we move on?
Hi, I'm Isaac Levinson from Emerson City. And my question is, playing college football, did you ever think you chose the wrong path in life?
As far as playing college football or beyond?
Just football in general.
Oh, no, not at all. No. It was absolutely the right career path for me. It was something that I looked forward to as a kid. I could envision myself playing in a stadium in front of a lot of people. Now, did I ever really think I would? It's a dream, and you'll never know until you actually make it. I had a good friend of mine who was a year older, and he said to me about 5 years ago, he goes, we were in my basement when we were like 11 or 12 years old. And he goes, and we were, downstairs playing either shooting pool or ping pong. And he goes, do you remember what you said to me? I go, no. He goes, we were talking about sports. He goes, and you told me then that you were going to play in the National Football League. And he goes, I didn't believe it. He goes, but now looking back, he goes, I don't know too many guys that actually say they're going to do something and then ultimately do exactly what they wanted to do. He goes, how did you know? I said, I didn't. It's just what I wanted to do, and I pursued it. I had an opportunity to pursue it. I mean, it took a lot of hard work, and I don't even think I was really super talented, but I worked at it, and I paid attention, because I wanted to be better. I wanted to be the best. So when you go through these drills and practice, whether in high school or in college, I was always the first guy in the drill and make sure I was doing it the right way because I took pride in it. And I think ultimately that's what paid off for me.
So, there's this time where you've realized the NFL career is over. You decide to come back to Mizzou, you get your degree, you feel like you're in a pretty good spot, and somehow you see an ad for the CIA and you answer it.
So after I graduated in December of 1988, went back to Dallas, and my wife was in medical school, and I was trying to, really taking a year off. I just wanted to figure out what I was going to do, which direction. I was sending out my audition reels, because I wanted to be a sportscaster. Everyone wanted to be on ESPN, of course. I was no different. So I was sending my stuff out, resumes to all these places. Wasn't getting a lick of attention. And I got some offers from some, smaller TV stations and some broadcast houses, but, sometimes you can be a little full of yourself. You think that you deserve something better. So I just kind of waited around and, it just didn't happen for me, Mike. And so it was, I guess it was March of '89. I'm reading the Sunday paper as I had done since I was a kid, cover to cover. And I open up read the sports section first, which I still do today, and then went to the news section. And I know 2-3 pages in, on the left side, full page ad for the Central Intelligence Agency. It was a recruiting ad. Now, I never thought that I would ever do anything with the federal government, any kind of civil service or anything like that. Nothing that I wasn't against it. It didn't appeal to me. I never really wanted to be in the military, which is amazing because we ended up working with the military quite a bit when I worked at CIA. But at the bottom of that ad, it listed the areas of employment. One was communications. So I didn't go the traditional route or the more popular route going through the journalism school, but at Missouri, the Department of Communication, which at the time the degree was called Speech and Dramatic Art, Radio, TV, Film, you get, I think, a more well-rounded communications foundation. So it's not just, on-camera stuff. It's writing, it's directing, it's producing, but you also study, strategic communications. So when I saw that, I just made the assumption, okay, this would be a good field for me. I'll get a chance and we'll go in there and make some industrial videos and, shoot stuff out to the employees and all that good stuff. So I applied and, a couple months later, I get this letter saying, hey, show up at the federal building on this date. We want to interview you. Well, I go and do that initial interview, and next thing I know, I passed that portion of it. And there was no real talk about what you're going to do until you take that first trip to Washington, D.C., and you sit down with a number of people who only go by their first names, no last names, because most of them are undercover. So I talked about, my experiences and having a liberal arts background actually made me more attractive, because what that means is that they can plug and play, fit me into virtually any role across that agency, whether at the time we had 4 directorates: Directorate of Intelligence, Directorate of Science and Technology, the Directorate of Operations, and the Directorate of Administration, which was the largest. It is the support element for all the other directorates. That's, the Office of Security and all human resources, all that falls under administration. It's changed now, but that kind of gives you a flair for the way it was. So I got interviewed by operations, to be a case officer. Case officers recruit other people to spy on their governments. And so I thought it went pretty well, but at the end, they come back and debrief and say, well, our Office of Security, I think, is probably better suited for you, and you'd fit right in. And I said, well, what happened with operations? They said, well, we think you're a little too honest to be So as a case officer, you have to do some shady things, okay? You know, when you try to convince some guy or female to spy on their own government, it's a big deal. And so you have to utilize a lot of tactics that you wouldn't necessarily teach your kid to do. You understand what I'm saying? So, long story short, interviewed with Office of Security, and they made me an offer, which was the best thing that I had got. And so, but there's a little bit I want to add to that why I actually chose to go to the agency. I'd interviewed with your old outfit, Anheuser-Busch, and so Mike worked at the brewery, and we know a lot of the same people. I interviewed for a sports marketing job, and one of my best friends to this day, Mike Owens, says that it's one of his biggest mistakes in life is not hiring me at Anheuser-Busch. But what they did, they advised me to do after my round of interviews. You know, they told me everything was great. He goes, but our people, our staff, and our marketing department, they have all have master's degrees, and we fund a program at Ohio University, which is in Athens, Ohio. That master's program for sports marketing and administration was funded by Major League Baseball, the National Hockey League, the NBA, and the NFL. Am I right?
Yes.
And what they said was, if you come out of this program, while we can't guarantee you that we'll hire you, there's a good chance someone else will, because you'll have the foundation that you need. So I've never met a challenge I didn't like. You know, I then signed up for the GRE, the graduate record exam, which you needed to get into some grad schools. And took the test, did well, applied to Ohio University, got accepted, and they only took 25 students a year. So when I found out that I was accepted into this master's program, I also got my letter of offer employment for CIA. So I'm now weighing, what do I do? Do I go to grad school? Do I go to work at CIA? So I made my decision based on this. I felt, remember I told you I was sending out those resumes and tapes to all these places? I felt that some of the people making those evaluations maybe didn't take me seriously. They probably looked at me as, hey, this big black kid from St. Louis, you know, did he really go to class? What does he really know? So I figured, okay, I can counter that. And this may not have even been the reason, but in my mind, this is how the mind works. In my mind, I said, you know, I'll go to work for the Central Intelligence Agency. I'll stay a couple of years, get some meat on my resume, and come back and either go to grad school or figure out where else I want to go. Needless to say, I stayed a little bit longer because I enjoyed what I was doing at the agency. And I was there for 13 years, and I learned so much in that place, and I wouldn't have traded, you know, the knowledge and experience for anything. You know, and in a lot of ways, you know, it rivals what I did in the National Football League, being a professional football player. Different, but still pretty much a high to have worked. As far as we know, I'm the only person who's ever done that. The only professional athlete who's also worked at a high level at the Central Intelligence Agency.
So you're in the CIA. You get some amazing duty. You spend 2 years in Tel Aviv, in Israel. You're involved in a protection duty there. You see a lot of interesting things. We know in the current events recently that there's been more turmoil, more fighting there. Tell us a little bit about your impressions of being in that region and what you're seeing now, and you know what you learned in that time in duty.
Well, how much time do we have?
We're running short. We're going to get some questions.
It's very detailed, but I will say this. So I was, as Mike mentioned, I earned this assignment to become an area security officer, and it's a tough job. I mean, I beat out probably 4 of the people that were applying. 4 people that were graded higher than me. I was a GS-13, they were all GS-14s. But because I had been traveling there as part of the protective detail for the prior directors, from Robert Gates, George Tenet, Jim Woolsey, and John Deutsch, I had a leg up because I already had area knowledge, very familiar with the officials at the Mossad, which is the Israeli intelligence agency that rivals CIA, and Shin Bet, which is their security agency, which is, you can compare that to the FBI here. So I knew a lot of the players, and for the director of operations, which ultimately owned the position, they selected me for that. And so once I was in country, I was responsible for our personnel and our facilities at the embassy, which was in Tel Aviv at the time, and the consulate, the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem. Making sure that people adhere to all the warnings, where to go, where not to go, how to protect yourself, things to look for to keep yourself safe, to keep your kids safe, and just general personal security and what to look for. If something doesn't feel right, if you may be getting surveilled by someone, just general knowledge about how to do things in an overseas environment. Again, a tremendous experience. Learned a lot about how the world really works. For close to a year, for about 8 to 10 months, I took on another role for a position that they weren't going to fill with a training officer. So I spent a lot of time in Gaza City and all the Palestinian territories in the West Bank. So got to know not just the Israeli way of life, but how the Palestinians live and what their points of view are of Israelis. And I got involved in a lot of the secret meetings and the planning of those meetings, the venues for those secret negotiations that led up to that, or the Intifada, the uprising, which we just kind of saw today's version of it. There was one back in 2000. So I was probably should have been more afraid of what I was doing, but I'm a young guy at the time, and it was all in a big adrenaline rush, and I just lived for it. I was totally engrossed in that job, and there was nothing that I look forward to more than just going to work every day. So it was that, when you have that responsibility of making sure a bunch of people remain safe, it's a huge responsibility, but at the end of the day, very proud of what I was able to accomplish there.
Let's get some questions about the CIA service, because I think this is a opportunity to talk a little bit about something very topical, his service in CIA, and we see a lot of things right now with protection details and the Secret Service and some of the turmoil they've seen. A lot of things like that you have to have feelings about, serving in that type of role.
Yeah, and things are evolving. When you're a member of a protective detail and you have a very high-profile protectee, whether you're serving as a Secret Service agent and protecting the President and Vice President of the United States and other cabinet members, what I did at CIA was exactly the same thing. The training was the same, just on a much lower scale, because, while their jobs, the President and the Vice President, their schedules are highly publicized. Everyone knows where the President is, or you know where the President is right now. CIA director's schedule is not public. And so when we go, we go with no fanfare, very low profile, even traveling around DC in motorcades. We don't fly around with lights and sirens. It's usually X amount of vehicles, if you will, nondescript. There are a lot of security details. You go to Washington, D.C., you'll see a lot of them. A lot of black SUVs with tinted windows and black sedans. So you don't know who's who. But that was all a part of that lifestyle. Right. But it's huge responsibility, that you are responsible for that person's, day-to-day life. 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. That protectee is under your watch. It's not just you. Of course, you have several teams of guys that do it, whether you're traveling domestically or whether you're traveling internationally. It falls upon you. And in that role, especially when you on the overseas part of it, you interface with those from foreign governments. So you learn about other cultures, but you also learn how to, you're listening oftentimes to an interpreter or translator because you don't speak that language. So you rely on that other person, and sometimes it's difficult. It's not as easy because that interpreter / translator may not have the best English skills himself or herself.
Right.
So the focus is you really have to take the job very seriously, pay attention, and ultimately, there are people there to help support it. But if anyone ever wants to pursue this, I highly advise it because you're getting to do something that a minuscule amount of people in this world will ever get a chance to do.
How about a question over here?
Hello, thank you. It's a real honor, and thank you for speaking today. My name is Connor O'Bannon, and I'm coming in from Blair City. My one question is, you obviously had two completely different jobs, and I would just like to know what is the most surprisingly similar thing between going through the NFL and CIA?
Rephrase that for me. I have to make sure I understood it.
I just want to know what the most surprisingly similar thing between going through the NFL and CIA is. So anything that was surprisingly similar.
So the similar aspects of them, the discipline, the hard work, the long hours. I think I was built for that. I spent longer days in CIA than I did in the NFL, but you're on an overseas trip. There's only so many of you. Your day can run 18, 19 hours easily. Don't get a lot of sleep, so it's important, especially if you're working in protection, just like if you're an athlete, you got to be in tip-top shape. So we work out frequently. We train frequently at the range to make sure that our skills are always sharp. In addition to what's structured and scheduled for you, you take on the personal responsibility of making sure you do the things that you have to do to be right every single day. Because you never have any off time. When I say off time, from a mental standpoint, you've always got to be on. Once you hit that compound and you go on the clock, it's work, and it's serious business. And the NFL is just like that too. You're playing at this level. There is no level higher. You're the best of the best, and you're playing with the best of the best. And the same way at the agency, you're working with some of the most talented people from a wide range of backgrounds. And I think it was a challenge, but also I think and that's where you enjoyed it, because you're working with like-minded people, which in many ways it made it that much easier to get along and do the job.
Very good. Question over here.
Hello, sir. Thank you for speaking.
Sure thing.
My name's Apollo Krigler, future Secretary of
Apollo
State for
Creed?
Boise. You can call me that too. That works. Future Secretary of State for Boise State, and I'm representing Boone City. And my question for you is, what specific skills have you learned from training and employment in the CIA that have helped you in life now as we speak?
Good question. So a lot of my friends tease me because when I go into a restaurant, I never sit with my back to the door. Why is that? Well, because once you learn these skills, you're always observing everything. You're always looking for what stands out, what's different, right? So if it's a day like today, if you go and sit at a Starbucks, you're sitting there and all of a sudden you see some guy walk in with a long trench coat. What's under that trench coat? Who knows? But he stands out, right? So it's awareness of everything around you. And I tell a lot of women this, but I always also tell a lot of men the same thing. And what came out of tragedy basically became a lesson. So in 93, after the presidential election in 92, Bill Clinton was elected president. And Jim Woolsey was nominated as CIA director. So one morning, before he was confirmed by the Senate, we were tasked with taking his, what's called the PDB. You guys heard of the PDB, the President's Daily Brief? It's a book with intelligence collection that analysts have assembled the night before. They do this every single day. So the president, vice president, they all get it. A number of members of Congress get it. CIA director gets it. Deputy director of CIA gets it. Anyway, so before nominee Woolsey was confirmed, he's a lawyer in downtown D.C., we're taking the PDB to him by hand. So as our chauffeur and I were leaving the compound, right, we get a call on the radio, hey, come back, we need to add some more material to the book. So we turn around, go back, get out of the car, go up the elevator, top of the 7th floor, someone hands me a new book, I give them the old book back. Back down the elevator, get in the car, come out of the garage. As we come out of the garage, notice one of our federal police vehicles driving like 80 miles per hour on the compound. I think the speed limit's 20. So immediately, there's something wrong. So we turn out and head towards the main gate. And as I can see at the main gate, there's a lot of cars stopped. But I see 5 of our officers, our security protective officers, we call them SPOs, 5 SPOs around this car. So we couldn't drive any further because all these cars were stopped. So I jump out of the car and run over. What's going on? I said, there's a guy shooting people on 123, which is the main road that turns into the driveway into CIA headquarters. You guys can look this stuff up. It's not super secret. It's not secret at all. And so, as it turns out, there was a guy named Miramal Kanzi, who was a Pakistani citizen. He drove his vehicle. So imagine on a street, a divided road, and you're trying to make a left turn across another lane of traffic, and you're driving down the street. Anyway, there's 2 lanes of traffic. So what this guy does is he comes up from the 3rd lane, blocks the 2 lanes of traffic that are turning left or attempting to turn left, gets out of his car, takes an AK-47 and walks between those 2 lanes of cars and starts randomly shooting people. He shoots 5, kills 2, jumps in the car, takes off. And so immediately, no one knew what was happening at this time. There's an observation post outside, at the corner of that intersection, and cameras and everything. That those things weren't there before. This is how things adapt when you have major incidents like this. So you wonder if we hadn't gotten the call to go back and get a new PDB, if I had seen that, and because of training, how would I have reacted in that situation? What would I have done? In my mind, I think I know what I would have done, but you just never know. You always hope that your training kicks in, you don't really think about it. But to that point, one of the things we always tell people, when you are in traffic, so those of you that drive, when you're in traffic, never get bumper locked in traffic. Because unfortunately, all those people trying to make a left turn, they couldn't react because they couldn't move. They were bumper locked with those cars. I always say keep at least a half a car length between you and the car behind you, right? Even if the car in front of you, even if the car behind you is on your bumper, you can at least, if you need to get out of there in a hurry, you can do so. Because there's always the distractions in front of you, but as we learn with a lot of terrorist incidents, those distractions are there for one thing because the threat's coming from the back. So, constantly looking in my mirrors, always looking for something to happen. You get to you know, an intersection, make sure your doors are locked, you know, tell your moms, your girlfriends, your sisters, all that stuff, you know. Just be aware, you know. Don't sit in a car outside too long. If you're a woman, back into a parking space in at the grocery store lot or at the shopping center, because there are incidents where you drive in and you're lollygagging, doing whatever, and some guy's watching you in the parking lot, and they'll slap something on your rear window, and you're about ready to back up, and you turn around and you look, oh, there's a note on my door. Who put this note there? It wasn't there. I didn't see that. You get out of the car and you get carjacked. Just little things like that. So it's about personal awareness. And those things I think about every single day. Sometimes it drives me crazy, but that is a result of the great training that I received there.
Okay, we're coming to the end of our time. We've got about 6 minutes left. I'd like to do as many questions as we can get. We're going to call this the Sports Night Lightning Round. So let's see if we can't get a few questions in really quickly. Let's start right here.
Hi, my name is Tyreek Anderson, and I'm from Con City and running for governor. I wanted to know, whenever you were going to school and they were doing the desegregation, I wanted to know if you had any concerns and what were they?
I didn't really have any concerns because I didn't know any better. I just knew we were going to a school. I mean, coming from one school that was integrated because it was gifted, kids from all over, different ethnicities, can't say that word today, and then going to another school across town. I didn't know what to expect. Now, when we got there, there was a lot of resistance from some of the families and some of the kids that didn't want black kids going to school with white kids. There were a few fights in the beginning, but I think we had a tremendous faculty and staff there at that school, and they worked with the kids, and you know, within a couple months, all those tensions, they went away. I think, and you left it up to the kids a lot to solve the problems. You know, we worked a lot of that stuff out on the playgrounds, but ultimately, we all realized we were there, you know, for one reason, and that was to learn. So with the guidance of, to me, people that were very brilliant, you know, as far as teachers were concerned, they really cared about students, regardless of ethnicity and background. They were there to learn. They made sure that's what happened. And I credit that experience of going to school with people that don't look like me, people from various races and ethnic backgrounds as an important learning experience for me. You know, because you learn more about what makes us different. But you also learn that we have a lot more similarities. And I always say to the people that complain about living in the United States, go travel. Go across the world. I've been to 50 countries, 5 continents, some of the worst places in this world. And you get a great appreciation for living in the United States once you've had a chance to visit some very difficult places.
Over here, yes.
Hello, I'm Landon Luke from Dugan City, and my question is, with the CIA being caught performing experiments on unknowing Americans back in the 60s and the NSA being caught tracking Americans in 2013, what do you think is a good way of preventing these three-letter agencies from violating citizens' rights without stopping what they were put in place to do?
Yeah, good question. I think it's about communication. You know, being, I think, straightforward and transparent about what you're trying to do. Now, this is a completely different era, you know, in the year 2021 than some of those experiments that took place in the 40s and 50s. You know, so much was unknown then, and it's unfortunate. There were a lot of things that were done to a lot of people, many of which you never even heard about, although there are some of those experiments that have been made public. And I know that those agencies have made apologies and made other amends to these families, but I don't think we have worry about those things happening today. But, again, I just think that communication and being transparent, I think you have congressional oversight that prevents all those types of things from happening in this day and age that happened back then. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Richards.
Let's go right here.
Hello. I'm Kalen Ireland. I'm representing Donovan City. I come from Houston, Missouri, where I also played football for quite a few years.
All right.
My question for you is, what is some advice you'd give to someone who is going to a position in the military with a top secret clearance?
Wait, can you repeat that again, please?
What are some words of advice you could give to someone who is going into a position in the military that requires a top secret clearance?
Okay, great question. I'm glad you asked that question. To obtain a security clearance, a position of trust with the United States government is a tremendous responsibility. And I used to do background investigations as a first job that I did with CIA. So I know what it takes, when you're looking at someone's background, all the requirements, that it takes for someone to acquire a clearance. The main thing is, if you haven't done anything illegal, don't do it now. Keep clean. Stay away from illicit drugs. Stay away from criminal activity. Those are the types of things that can keep people from obtaining a security clearance. Now, I will say this. Our model then, and I'm not sure how much it's changed now, but you're looking for a well-rounded person. What a person does at 18, is different than a person that's trying to obtain a clearance at the age of 25 or 30 or older. You can excuse a lot of things that you did as a young man or a young woman, as a teenager, or even as a young adult. You're expected to know better once you're older, okay? That said, they're going to look at all the things that you've done and then look at what you've done since then, okay? What you've done in the last, say, 5 years or the last 2 years. Even if you've done some bad things, how have you lived your life going forward? So a lot of those things can be forgiven if you have made amends and you're tracking in the right direction. It's not everyone's going to get a security clearance, but it is a tremendous honor. So if that is your goal, then now you know what you've got to do to work towards getting one. And it is a little bit easier, I would say, if you're in the military, because you're in the military. I mean, you take that oath to God and country, and you're expected to adhere to a level of responsibility than an ordinary citizen would. You got to live that every day. So that's why I think if you're tracking towards a military career, you've got a better chance if you're moving into the intelligence community. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
Sure.
I actually have currently enlisted in the Navy through the nuclear program, so I'm being investigated right now through the...
Outstanding.
Okay, we've got 1 minute before we go to your local news. Last question right here. Quickly, please.
Thank you. My name is Josh Wilson. I'm representing Weir City. So, my question is, in the past, the CIA and FBI have been a part of committing several atrocities to predominantly black communities as well as black civil rights leaders. Knowing this, can you speak on your career within the CIA and how being a black man has impacted your career and experience as a security officer?
Wow, tough question. Very tough question. So there was, I think in 1992, and there are a lot of theories. I don't know how many of these things have been proven, but we did a town hall. And the director of Central Intelligence was John Deutsch. And we were in Compton, California, just outside of Los Angeles. Maxine Waters was the district that she represented. So there were all these conspiracy theories about how the CIA was funneling money and drugs into black communities. You know, that was pretty much proven to not be the case. So there's always a lot of spin that goes with a lot of these things. I think that's one of the reasons that the director at the time, John Deutsch, wanted to do the town hall on national TV. So he answered some tough questions. I don't remember a whole lot about that evening, but I think it was wise to do it, to have the community that had those direct questions to be able to sit there and answer, you know, and ask questions and get answers, you know, from an official at the highest level of government. And I think it went a long way to sort of dispel a lot of those things that have been, you know, suspected of happening. With CIA, let me tell you, there are conspiracy theories, you know, that run rampant all over the place. Now, you know, there are things that I know that, you know, the agency has been accused of doing that I know that have, you know, that never occurred. And there are things that have probably happened that I've not been briefed on also. So I don't pretend to know everything that has happened. So I can't fully answer your question maybe the way that you would like, just because, you know, even though I have had a top secret clearance, you know, there's a thing called SCI, Special Compartmented Information, and different people are briefed into different security components, right? You know, we may have the same clearance, but you may be briefed in 50 different areas, and I may be briefed in 60 different areas that don't intersect. So I don't have all the answers. And I just know that, again, I mentioned earlier, it's about transparency. And I think with congressional oversight being better probably now than it was, and with people being able to gain access to information that was once previously classified and now has been declassified, and with, of course, the internet, there's a lot of ways to get information now. It's a very convoluted sort of and a long response to your question, but you know, it's a tough thing because we have heard about these experiments that have happened, you know, years ago that did occur, and it's unfortunate that they occurred. And I know there have been amends that have been made to those individuals and their families. But these things I don't think we'll ever see happening again. Just as I think because of the nature of what the intelligence community does and the cooperation amongst other agencies within the intelligence community. I just don't think that's ever going to happen with the congressional oversight that exists today.
Howard, I wish we had another hour and a half or so,
So do
because
I.
we have not covered so many topics, but I can't thank you enough for being here tonight on Sports Night. Gentlemen, Howard Richards. Thank you again for being here, and we hope you'll come back and see us again very soon.
Will do. And I will say you guys had amazing questions. Clearly, there are people in this room that are going to be running this country one day. So I wish you all the best of success in whatever you choose to do from a standpoint of professional careers. You all will be successful. Good luck to you.
Howard Richards. All right, that's Sports Night for tonight. Stay tuned. Your local news is next.
Good night, guys. Say hi to your dad.